Hi, my name is Skeleton Man Thing on the internet, also known as Roofie Boy. Oh shit, that sounds really, really bad. Well, there goes my career in politics. So today we're going to draw my comic, Le Comic. We're going to draw another page. So to kind of give a little bit of a heads up on what's going on here. Two of the three main characters. We got them separated. They're just, sad and stuff. They're getting along with their lives. Sections here. The Dynamo Quiz Finals. We got that here. We got them as seniors, senior citizens, and they are 2, 1, bam. They are seniors, no more. Got them getting their job applications, their internships, they're graduating, and then bam. Caps going up in the air, cap that, they see each other, and then this next page is gonna be the two of them having a nice little bonding moment, rekindling of the friendship a little bit. We had that on another page here. But basically, we're going to be drawing that moment. Riveting stuff, I know. So basically, like I said, we're going to be doing that panel from a later part, but we're kind of covering it in real time. Because basically, this part is going to be basically kind of going over the different moments in the book. Because, we do our things our own way here. As should you guys. I know I want what I want for the big panel, because the big panel is more or less going to be that one here. So, well, I might as well just go ahead and start drawing that one here. Oh, of course. I guess it's technically not a thumbnail sketch per se, but I kind of just do my thumbnails and kind of, pencil. We're going peak unprofessionalism here. Like, I got some thumbnail sketches and stuff. I mean, I'll do that from time to time. I'm trying to see if I can build me a little website so I can kind of put that stuff on there, because in a sense I kind of like just, showing the things that I feel like I would want to see doing art and drawing and things like that. One of my favorite aspects of the Scott Pilgrim books, the colored versions have a lot of behind the scenes background material. Got like thumbnail sketches and things like that, I think in volume 5. I kind of would love to do that kind of thing, but in website form. That I want them to be able to kind of see my process, I mean, one of the things that I like doing, and I kind of talk about something like this in my newest video, actually. Now, this is not like a full page spread or anything like that, but there's a similar idea that I got with my stuff that I do, is that basically the bigger it is, the more important the moment is. This is going to be a big moment. This is like the reconciling of the two characters in this moment. So basically that's going to be in a bigger frame. Even though these are big moments in the story, they appear in other points, and they are much bigger and more focused on. So of course they're kind of in these kinds of panels and pages and stuff like that. This is sort of just supposed to be like a recap. You flesh it out at an earlier point in the story, and then when you glance over it again, and you have the context of that moment in your brain whenever you're looking through this. So it's like you see this and you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. I remember this. And it requires you to have read an earlier part of the book. It kind of makes the reading a little more, and thus you're seeing, like in this page, you're seeing the moments leading up to the point at which he loses Skeleton Guy for a little while, but then, and she's sad about that, but then when she gets to here where she remembers that moment where they rekindled and they're besties again, that makes her smile. So this moment will only work, honestly. Well, I mean, you could probably. I mean, I don't know. Maybe someone could read this and not have this other page and be able to get what's going on here. But I feel like this moment's gonna play better when you've had these fleshed out versions of these moments over here. Them taking a picture together after graduating. Kind of drew myself in a box, pun intended, a little bit here because you're seeing this from the other side of the fence. You got your little goal up here. It's a football field. I basically have to have this moment be outside. I put a little note here actually. If I misspell something or I do something wrong, I can just use the classic film school excuse of the artist intent. The inside here, because even though it might be a little hard to see here, because they're inside the fence, I might make this panel maybe. The idea that I have is that I want the two characters to end up in this panel, but I gotta figure out I'm gonna say about 4 panels, so 3 up here, 1 down here. I'm gonna try and figure out how to get to that spot in 3 panels. I might see about, so they look at each other. I'm gonna say this panel, I might have them up close here. They're gonna see, I'm gonna say Melvin's, I think I'm gonna have them maybe surround them by some people here, but have it be apparent that I'm gonna put Melvin's the skeleton character down here. But I'm gonna try and have Melvin's mother be over here. Center of the frame, you'll be able to see her. And I might even maybe make the other characters around here, I might make them a bit more silhouetted. That way it's apparent that they're not important in this moment. Let's see, I gotta make it apparent that she's holding a camera. Well, maybe I should. It's a phone. Let's see, so if I was holding a camera, I'd be taking a picture with my right hand here. So yeah, okay, so she would be holding the camera with this hand, and then would be pointing with this one, because this would technically be her left hand if flipped around. Maybe she'll be waving them over, because that's a mama thing to do. Wave the kiddos over for a picture. Let's see. Give her chesticles. Little TMI, but I mean, you're gonna be drawing that anyway on a female character, so I mean, not much of a thing to fuss about for anyone that doesn't like, you know, nickname and stuff. I don't know. I got a South Parky kind of sense of humor, so although I definitely kind of pull it back a little bit. Let's see, we got the dad character in the background, but I'm keeping them sort of back in the back because with everything that goes on in the story, the dad character's not exactly well liked by either of the two characters here. Even the worst of the characters, like his character, I don't want to just make them a terrible human being. They might do bad in the service of what they think is a good thing, but I don't want to just fully just make... Like, there's some characters in this that you're gonna clearly see as being bad. This story revolves around characters finding their own destiny or finding their own self-worth despite their circumstances in life. This part of the story, which is definitely a lighter affair than the other character story, because it's called Melvin and Lilith. Melvin's side of the story is definitely more of a it's still got some tragedy in the story, but it's definitely a lot more lighter in comparison to the Lilith end of things, who he's a succubus and he's a high school dropout. You're meant to see a character sort of only find their self-worth through their lifestyle that only really a succubus can have. But of course, she eventually has to find her worth outside of that, and she finds it through another character that actually treats her right. Classic, old school, feminist story. Selling yourself bad. And sometimes men can be shitty people. But it's pretty fair as far as how it portrays those kinds of things. I feel like I have a tightrope act to do with this kind of story because, I mean, how do you tell a coming of age story with with themes that are definitely they could easily in any other media go in the direction of gratuitous and it'd be just weird. But I want to tell a story that has tough subject matter but at the same time is PG-13, or at least at the very least a harsh PG-13 kind of story. And this element of it is supposed to definitely be sort of levity, I guess. Like, could I feel like subject matter, like a girl becoming basically a prostitute? I think that's not exactly a happy story. It's like, how do you bring levity to that? It's like, you gotta have another storyline that is definitely more of your standard romance story. Granted, it doesn't end for these two characters in a way that's necessarily um it's a happy ending, but it's a bittersweet happy ending. But this is meant to be the B story that brings levity to the other half of the story and is definitely a lot more standard coming of age love story, but it leads its way into the other end of the story where you got your succubus character and your skeleton character eventually meeting, and then, you know, and yeah, this is probably gonna be spoilerific as heck, but I mean, I feel like I have to kind of explain it a little bit. I don't know. That's just me, though. And I like talking about my story. But the thing with doing a comic that is dealing with subject matter is definitely, like I said, it's like you want to have levity. So you want to have your B story that gives you a break from the rougher storyline. But the storylines, of course, will converge and have a nice, cohesive, happy ending. And have characters like the succubus character sort of finding someone that doesn't treat her like garbage. And that's kind of the direction that I'm more or less wanting to go with. It's like Blue Valentine meets like a Tim Burton kind of story with characters that are hopefully well-rounded three-dimensional characters. For a book that I've already probably got over a couple hundred pages in the bag at this point. I mean, this has been a long project that I've worked on, and I would hope that with my absolute obsession with trying to make, I guess, every character feel fleshed out and make every storyline, like, building on it to an extent that I feel like everything flows nicely and every character feels like Like, you can clearly tell from point A to point B where the story's supposed to be going and everything like that, and you can be like, oh yeah, that character did this because this character, because of this and that. But at the same time, with it being a mostly visual story, I would hope that I can deliver the story in such a way that's clear and everything. This is one of those ways that I'm doing my visual storytelling, and I don't see a lot of people doing this sort of thing, but at the same time, I feel like it's something that, I mean, then again, this might just be something that I'm just doing, and maybe I might be doing something different here. But yeah, one of the ways that I want to convey storytelling throughout the dialogue is to almost like be able to, it's almost like forming what would be dialogue into pictures and then putting it in like a thought bubble with what they're thinking in their head, and you're seeing it visually and all that stuff, and that's kind of one thing I'm doing here. So like, she's going to wave her hand over, and she has her phone, turning it into landscape mode. You got a little camera thing up here with a little snap. The snap is not quite as clear as it could be. Once I get into the computer and all that stuff and scanned and all that. Computers! I need to fix and edit. And there's little things that I could do. I won't clean everything up, because honestly, I like the idea of drawing and kind of working with mistakes. But for the most part, I want to keep things that are a little bit imperfect, as to be able to sort of, it's like I want to keep things that are like little human touches, and even kind of have that be something that you know, speaks to what I'm doing with the story too, like in a sense using the imperfections of the story to sort of mirror the characters in a sense. Another thing I talk about here, but I kind of babbled my way into it, was how to make a character with a cushy life interesting, especially when the other end of the title has more dramatic possibilities. So you have a lawyer dad that's trying to get his son into the business. But yeah, you have two characters. One's downward spiral, there's conflict, there's drama, that's interesting. But then you have the other character who is more of the goody two-shoes character. How do you make their character interesting? And I had a little bit of trouble with that. It's kind of like a Superman dilemma. It's like you have a character who's the Boy Scout and all that stuff. How do you make the Boy Scout interesting? And for Melvin's character, it's how do you make this character who has a fairly cushy life, how do you make them interesting and have drama? Well, my kind of way of going to that was, why don't you make him sort of not know where he wants to go with his life? It's like, give him a crisis of identity that he eventually finds that causes conflict between him and his father. Basically, you don't give them a material crisis, you give them an internal crisis. And it's like, okay, there you go. It's like you have your conflict for that character. Then everything just sort of goes from there as far as the story and everything like that. And of course, it eventually causes problems between these two characters. And of course, you think, okay, you're having a love story here. Something happens and then they're gonna get back together, right? Well, it's like, what if they don't get back together? What? Where does that leave the Sarah character, the ghost girl? It's like, where does that lead her? And then it becomes a story about finding her own self and person without the main character. And she chooses to become her own person and be happy on her own. And I think that's, you know, that's a really good message to me, I think. Characters will make mistakes, but the mistakes, as well as figuring themselves out and overcoming their flaws, will lead them to be much happier and living better lives. But yeah, how do you do monsters and stuff like that in a real world setting and not have it be so over the top. Because you could get plenty over the top with this kind of concept. Try to hunker down things that are more, you know, what could potentially be, you know, high fantasy. How do you turn something fantasy into something that's believable? Basically, human world with human logic and stuff like that with monsters. But it's like, but then there's like things that I've thought about. It's just like, okay, what if magic was just science? Things that would be considered magical in a whole fantasy story. It's like, what if that was considered almost like a science? It's like, what if another avenue of communication is through, you know, magic spells? Because at one point in time, science was thought of as magic. So it's like, what if, you know, things that would be considered magic in another storyline, what if it was just kind of like science here? So it's like, so you got witches being scientists and stuff like that in this world or something like that. What does the succubus do in the real world? What does the skeleton do in the real world? And of course it loops right back around to world building. The whole story basically started out of two cute characters being a couple, and then, you know, one thing led to another. Then you got the struggles of being a succubus prostitute and skeleton character who doesn't have a spine. But yeah, basically it's like that's how a world like that gets created and how a story gets fleshed out. You start with something kind of simple and then you kind of turn it into something much more fleshed out and much more developed. Heck, even the Sarah character wasn't even a poltergeist at one point in time. It was actually her character was actually a zombie at one point named Shelby. I'm gonna hope that you know, that's me trying to tackle the topic of... So to save y'all time with the gobbledygook of a discussion, basically I talk about tackling heavy topics like parental neglect leading girls to chase terrible relationships, sleeping around in high school, this coupled with homelessness and poverty leading to prostitution. I also tried talking about how overbearing parenting, fear, and trying too hard to ensure your child has a good life can lead to resentment and trauma. I tried talking about this, but I'll be honest, I covered this pretty poorly in the stream and somehow got into a ramble about how to tackle subjects without getting into gratuitous territory, as well as representing topics in a nuanced way that also doesn't diminish or misrepresent things in the topic. This is one of those things that is tough about streaming this sort of thing. It can really devolve into word salad if you're not careful. And with anxiety and overthinking about how people will perceive my works, this definitely makes trying to speak in a way that gets my point across properly a bit difficult. Going off the cuff isn't exactly an easy thing, I'll admit. But that's where I gotta just pick myself up, keep going, and try to do better the next time. To not be discouraged. Because if you start getting discouraged in one place, it'll affect another. Like making truthful art that shows the darker sides of humanity. Just stay encouraged, be smart about it, be smart how you cover things, and be bold in making stories. Because making art like this is important, I feel. Sorry to get preachy there. I don't know. It felt better than trying to show you the entire stream. And I think the page is done. Alright guys, that's it for me. Subscribe if you want to stay tuned for what I got in the pipeline. I don't know when I'll post next, but if you like these sorts of videos, definitely stick around. The door is always open at the Doom Room Bebop. Take care, guys.